edition of the Who Gets the China podcast, where we're helping each other navigate life with aging parents successfully. And today I'm super excited to have my friend and expert Julie Butscher with us. Julie is a licensed clinical social worker, and she really specializes in helping older adults find resources and make decisions about living successfully as the challenges of aging increase. And she just has this wealth of knowledge, insight, these memorable phrases that I love from her that can help us navigate these decisions with our own families or the people that we care for or we love. So I'm super happy to have her here today to share her expertise. So welcome, Julie.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah. Is there anything else you want to add to your introduction that I didn't cover?
No, you got it.
All right,
Sounds
let's.
pretty fancy.
Well, you are pretty fancy. I love it. Every time we talk, I come away with a little nugget that I write down and remember. So it's super helpful. So I'm really truly excited to share that with our listeners today. So, Julie, you know me well enough, and I'm a person that likes to have a plan. I like to be on top of things. And so, as a person that likes to be a planner, I love your approach because I feel like your approach is also really about having a plan for what's possibly to come. And I know it seems simple, but in these topics, like some of us just don't want to talk about things related to aging, getting older, losing capabilities, losing independence. But we know if there's no plan, something is just going to happen. One of your favorite phrases that I have is plan for the worst, but hope for the best. So I kind of wanted to start with that sentiment today.
Okay.
How do we apply that to getting older?
My job would be much easier if I had a crystal ball and I could tell you exactly what life was going to look like. And we don't know. And so I that is why I always say let's plan for the worst and hope for the best. And I have always been the type of person that if I know how I can deal with the worst case scenario, then everything else will come into place. So that to me is really important. And I also feel like if you don't plan, you kind of are making some decisions by not planning because some things get taken out of your control. And I've been working with seniors for a long time. I've been in this position for about 8 years where I go into people's homes and talk to them about what they're looking at. And usually I've come in because something has happened, a fall or a hospitalization. And so it's forcing people to plan a little bit. I always wish that I could talk to people well before there was something that was a crisis. And, I just always do think, so we're like one incidence away from a huge crisis. And so, planning really takes that out. And it also lets people think about what they want and what they want their future to look like.
So, talk to me for a minute about how you do what you do. Because I guess until I knew you and I talked with you about what you do, I didn't really understand that there were licensed clinical social workers that could come in and help navigate these life transitions.
I think it's one of the greatest things that, my services are actually paid for by Medicare because Medicare has figured out it's much better to keep people in their home for as long as possible. And there are a lot of resources for people to stay comfortably in their home. So usually that's one of my big first questions is whether somebody, I ask them whether they want to age in place, meaning staying in their own home, bringing in services that they need versus moving into a community. And I ask people, how do those two things make you feel? And what do you think about when you hear, aging at home or aging in place or going to a community? Um, there's so much about going to a community, and we'll table that for a second. So let's just, for aging in place, I think that team seems to be most people say they want to age in place. And so there are things for people, whether it is, I mean, the things that I usually try to focus on is, you know, dressing, bathing, meal preparation, transportation, housekeeping, laundry, shopping, and med management.
Okay.
And those are sort of the big things. And pretty much all of those things we can bring in services to help people. Some of them are free, some of them are paid, some are covered by your, so insurance and long-term care insurance, people had taken a separate policy, VA benefits, and then Medicaid for low income seniors. So those are really the four ways that pay for caregivers, but there's a lot of nonprofits out there that do things for free and or very reduced price. So or make a donation.
Yeah, so like
Mm-hmm.
let's take this for my example, for instance. So say I'm the daughter and I'm like, oh, I'm not sure, right? What's the right choice for my parents at this point? They seem like they're doing pretty well, but some stuff is falling through the cracks. Maybe certain things look like the medication management, I think is a great one, right? Because that's a lot. And my mom has affectionately named my sister as the medication czar of the family. So she helps
Uh-huh.
my mom. But like, what are some of how might I tap into some of the resources?
So one thing is that if you actually, I mean, the best thing is if you've had a family member that's either been in the hospital or is showing some decline, is asking the primary care physician to actually make a referral
Okay.
to home health, if they're homebound. So that's a service that you only get if you are homebound, meaning not driving or taxing to leave the home. Um, or you can get a palliative care, which is not hospice care. I think people get those two really confused. Palliative care and home care has the same goal, which is curative.
Hmm.
They want to get better. Hospice is for end of life. And again, life would be really easy with a crystal ball and you knew somebody had 6 months left to live, so they get hospice. And it's very funny that you say this, like the whole thing about hospice is, it doesn't make any sense. You can only get it within 6 months of life. However, nobody knows what 6 months of life is, because that would be
Right,
something that you
right.
would know afterwards.
Of
So you
course.
can meet criteria for hospice. You can meet the criteria that your doctor thinks you're within 6 months. Somebody could bounce back, and we call it graduate from hospice if
Hmm.
you are doing really well and you no longer need the services, or you just get, re-signed up, every cert period, certification period. So, it is, and so that is a whole nother
Okay.
care. We could spend years
Okay.
talking on that too.
So
But
maybe
but
that'll
so
be a whole nother episode.
right, right, exactly. And that's the thing about what you're doing is you can find there's so much out there. But so if you need a social worker, the best way to get it is through home health.
Okay.
If somebody needs a home health social worker, not all home health agencies hire social workers. I happen to work for an agency that really values. They see that when we don't have if we don't have social work, a lot of the issues that families are dealing with really are, not just the physical of getting up and down from a chair and that you need physical therapy. It's that, that what is associated with being independent, even sort of like talking about med management, where,
Hmm.
your sister is considered the, medications, guru. There's more than, like sometimes I'll ask people, how do you do with medicine? And they're like, oh, I'm doing fine. And then when I deep into it, they're not ordering their medicines on time. They're not ordering
Right.
that, or they have four different medicines that are slightly different from the pharmacy, and they don't know which one they're supposed to be taking, and so, like the doctor changed the dosage, and they can't remember, am I taking the 200 or the 400, like all some
Oh
things
yeah.
like
That's a lot.
is it's a lot.
It's a
It's a
lot.
lot. So, and I'm a huge fan of medication boxes,
Yes.
just for the fact that, I mean, when you do something every single day, it is hard to forget, whether you did it. It's same thing like if you usually brush your teeth at the same time each day. If you forgot for some reason, something happened and something, the dog starts throwing up, so you run out of bed and you don't brush your teeth right then, you could be halfway through the day going, oh my gosh, I don't think I brushed my teeth. And that's a very normal thing. And if it's your medicine and somehow you're
Hmm.
off, you then can't remember, and you're not going to sit there and open up like, okay, I have 30 tablets and I've had this, it's so much easier if you have a medication box.
Yeah. We started doing this Amazon medication packets, and I'm not trying to plug Amazon one way or the other, but um, it's, I think it will ultimately be really great, but the transition is very challenging. And that's why my sister is the medication czar, because she has gracefully taken that on. But like in its ideal state, it does tell you. The little packet says this was Monday's morning, this was Tuesday
Yes,
morning, so you should know. But even then, with people that are quite able and the memory is good and even high functioning, it still gets confusing.
it does. Yes. Yes. And then, I actually am a big fan of using those medications, the pre-filled,
Okay.
what you're talking about. And there's Amazon does it. There's also different pharmacies. You can do it locally, depending on, where you are. But then a lot of times I get people that can't open the packets.
Yes, that's true too. That is
Yeah.
totally
Because
true. Yep, we've had that
so,
conversation.
so and so like right there, that's a great example of that. There are, like, with just medications, you can have a company that comes in and sets up your medication. There are medication box that have beepers and reminders that only open at certain times. I mean, there's so many elaborate things that you can do. Having a family member fill a medication box,
Hmm.
there's so many things that, that's right there is a great example that when I go in, there's usually probably about like 5 or 6 things that we can come up with depending on what people want and what they're comfortable with. And I do think people listen to me because I try not to take the decision away from them. So
Okay.
I think that's one of the most important piece is when you are getting older and you already are losing so much, whether it's your memory or mobility, whether you have friends that are dying. One of the things that's a reoccurring theme I hear a lot with seniors as they age is this lack of independence. And so what I do is I come in and I'm like, you know, let me give you ideas and let's brainstorm. And I never come in with this idea that I am going to fix the problem. It is, we are going to fix this, and we are going to come up um with things you can work that you can live with. So,
Right.
and I also think, like you brought up the whole, like with you and your sister, I think it's very important that family has buy-in, because sometimes I will say, okay, so this sounds like this is the plan. And, the senior will be like, yep, I'm 100% on board. And I'll look over and there's a child behind the parent, like shaking their head. And I'll say, hey, just throwing this out there, is everyone in the family okay with this? And so that way, then it gives the children a chance to say, I'm not okay with it. And let me tell you why. And then
Hmm.
I'll say, okay, that's great. You're not okay with it because I don't think mom's going to physically be able to open up the packets. Okay. So we like the idea of pre-filled, but we don't like the idea of them coming in packets. What are some of the other options? And so that is, sort of where I try to make sure, because if it's not going to work,
Right.
then we're no better off
Yes. Right.
setting
If
up.
you're not going to stick with it, it's not going to help you at all. And
Yeah,
I mean, I'm learning so much from doing this work recently that there are so many options that, like, because I hadn't ever had to explore it before, I had no idea. And so I think
yeah,
that's what's kind of for me so fascinating about this area is through technology or expertise or, amazing people like yourself. Like, there are a lot of great solutions we can put into place to help people maintain their independence. And
yeah.
we all want that, right? It's a win-win when we
Right.
do it. So let's talk for a minute about being a reluctant planner, because I
Uh-huh.
have experience with this, and I know you have experience with this. And something that you mentioned one day when we were talking was, I think none of us really want to look to the day when we need care, right? We want to feel like we're going to be independent. I can do all my
Mhm.
things. I don't, like, I'm not there. Like my dad always says, don't send me to the home. I don't want to go to the home, right? Okay. But I think you had a way of asking like the question from a theoretical standpoint so that we could just imagine like if then. So can you talk a little
Right.
bit about that conversation and how you navigate it?
So one of the biggest things is I usually start off with asking that question, aging in places versus going into a community. I use the word
I
community.
love it.
Community is so much better than facility or home or all of that. I mean, like and communities, who wants to go to a facility? I mean,
I
you'd
know.
rather go to a community. So
I
I
love
have
community.
really,
I'm going to use that. Yes, I love that.
yeah,
It's much nicer.
it
And it's
and
true.
and words do matter,
Yeah.
I mean, it does matter what you call things, and for hearing it. So I will usually it's that I'll spend most of my time talking to somebody about what aging in place looks like. And then I'll say towards the end, like, I know when I mentioned community, you made a face. And that's that's usually what I say is you made a face. Tell me what it is. And most of the time it is I hear a story about their parents. Their parents had to be put into a home. And when they think of a home, they think of what we now call skilled nursing
Hmm.
facilities. SNFs is the
Okay.
acronym, SNF, SNFs.
Okay.
Um, which again doesn't sound great.
No, it doesn't
I mean,
sound
like,
great.
yeah,
Yeah, it needs a
let's
better
go to a
acronym
SNF.
for sure.
Yeah. So, but a skilled nursing facility is really what they equate where they're going. And so then I do a little bit of education that there are definitely different parts. There are different communities. I mean, there's communities that are independent where basically, you have your own apartment and you get help with meals, transportation, some light housekeeping, maybe changing your bed, type
Hmm.
things like that. And then there's assisted living, which is, helping with medications and dressing and, incontinence, getting up and down from a chair, that more. And then there's memory care. And people think, oh, mom, dad, Aunt Jane got diagnosed with dementia. I need to look at a memory care community. And you really don't. Memory care communities are only for advanced stages when there are somebody is a wander risk, meaning that they not only that if they left the place that they would not be able to get back to it, but that they have this desire to keep leaving. That they think they're going to be searching for home, and so they're going to keep going out the front door. That's when you need to look at memory care or behavioral issues.
Okay. So I never heard the term a wanderess before, but I kind of love that term.
So I usually then try to do a little education and with people, and I explain sort of with that. And I'll say, and usually it's somebody, a lot of times it's somebody that's just been diagnosed with dementia, and they are like, oh, thank God. I said to I don't want to leave my home because I don't want to be in a locked community. And I'm like, you would not be going into a locked community.
Okay.
I can't promise you. And I do not ever lie to people. I will never promise somebody, that we can always keep them out of a community. But I will say, let's talk about when you would have to go into a community. And so, and a lot of it is, financial. I mean, the cost of, in Denver right now, the going rate for caregivers is between 40 and $45 an hour. And most companies have a 4-hour minimum. And when you start adding it up, when you're talking about 24-hour care at home,
Right.
you're talking about $20,000, where an assisted living, is going to be between 6 and 8, depending on what your care needs are. I'm not like saying, oh, it's just 6 or 8, like that's, pocket
Right. Right.
change. It's legitimate, expenses that are expensive, but there's a reason why. And I do sort of try to talk to people about what all of, if you're not paying rent, you're not paying utilities, you're not paying for groceries. I mean, when you start taking off what people are not paying for, the price tag isn't quite as bad, but it is a big amount. So I do ask people, at what point do you see it needing to be? So, you would be needing to move in. And so, like, for instance, for my parents, both my parents are alive. They're 94 and 85, living alone in my childhood home.
Awesome.
And
Great for
awesome.
them. Yeah, love it.
Great for them. But I've said to them, what is it? And they both have said, as long as we are both alive and we can help each other, we want to stay in our home. And my siblings and I have said, okay, we can honor that.
Hmm.
And so that is, again, our goal, but with the understanding that if something happened to one of them, that we would have to then make a decision.
Right. So they have a good sort of medium term plan in place, right? As long as everything's going fine, this works for them. And, hopefully that continues for us as long as possible. But it sounds like they've also involved you guys as a family in the conversation to say, okay, this is what we want. If this happens, then what's next? So that you and your siblings are on board.
Right, exactly. So again, if somebody is very reluctant, that's when I think an outside person is important. And so I have a lot of friends and family who have said to me, I'm trying to talk to my mom and dad, and they're not there yet. And I have, sometimes me as an outside person, I've gone in and talked to people, with them, or I've encouraged them to find someone. A lot of primary care physicians, PCPs, are
Hmm.
actually hiring social workers in their office.
Oh,
So that's another thing that I would say is there somebody in with your PCP if they don't qualify for getting home health? Is there somebody in the office, especially if they work with geriatrics?
right. Because then it sounds like what you could do is have this conversation of, okay, let's say somebody falls and breaks a hip and they need to go to rehab for 6 weeks. I'm just making this up. I don't know if that's
Yeah.
accurate at all, but whatever. Then you could say,
Good.
what would you want then? Am I close?
Yeah.
So, like you could say to them, okay, if this happens, then what would your preference be? So that at least you kind of have like the rough outline of a plan. Because I agree, like even my parents, they do great together because they support each other.
Right.
But if one were to, need to be in rehab for some weeks to recover, like I think that would shift the dynamic. And I mean, maybe my sister or I could go out there for some period of time, but maybe not. Maybe they would need somebody. I've tried to say, let's just get somebody for a few hours a week so that you have a relationship with somebody, so that if something were to happen, we wouldn't be then scrambling to find this person who's going to come help with whatever medication, meals, companionship during that time period. And I have met with like a full brick wall. They want
Right.
nothing to do with this at all.
So one of the things when I get that, what I start asking them is, I'll say, let's take off your plate the things you hate to do first.
Okay. Love it. I'm with you.
Yeah. Yeah, because and the other thing is that, and one of the other lines that I say all the time is, somebody scrubbing your toilet does not change your independence level. And
Sure.
that is, you can still be extremely independent, but just somebody's cleaning your toilet. At 85, there's some things, getting down on your knees and cleaning a toilet, cleaning out the gutters. Those are things that you really should not be doing. And so what I'll say to people is, another one of the lines I use a lot with families is that when kids say to me, Mom refuses to let me clean the toilets. And I'll say, everyone has a right to make their own bad decisions. And it
Yes.
is very true. And I'll say, I'll say, you told me when I first walked in that you did not want to go to a community, that you wanted to die in this house. And it sounds like your family's trying to do that. However, when you cannot take care of yourself and it's completely unsafe, there's there's nothing we can do about that. So if you could start taking some things off your plate, you are going to extend the time you can stay in your home. You have the power to stay in your home longer. So let's take the things you hate to do. And then I'll usually have someone go, well, you know, my laundry is actually in the basement and I have to walk down a flight of stairs, and I actually get really scared carrying the laundry basket up. So I'll be like, okay,
Okay.
let's start there.
Yeah, let's dig in
And
on this.
yeah, and so, there actually are laundry services. There, pay by the pound. Somebody picks it up in front of your house, they deliver it back the next day, folded, all of
Sounds
that.
great.
So
Can I sign up?
yeah,
Sign me up.
you you can sign up now. Actually, it's funny. I think a lot of the young 20-year-olds are starting to do this because they can get an apartment that doesn't have laundry services,
Yeah,
and it's cheaper than them going to spend time at a laundromat and
right.
all of
That's
that.
true.
So yeah, so there
Right.
really are, so,
Yeah.
some, you don't have to be a senior to use this service. And that's what I usually say. Let's take off your plate the things you hate the most.
Okay.
And if you love to cook, again, you might love to cook, but you hate to plan, grocery shop. There are, I can give great plugs for so many different things, like you mentioned, like HelloFresh. There are tons of local and national things that get mailed to your house. There are chefs that come to your home and prepare the meals in your home, and it's not that expensive. I mean, it's definitely, I always say it's more expensive than Chipotle, and it's cheaper than, doing Grubhub or something,
Okay.
takeout that's getting delivered to your house.
Okay. So it like some of these things might be more of a financial middle ground than you actually realize.
Exactly. When you compare cost,
Hmm.
when we're talking about, it's going to be, we'll just use a, round number, $8,000 to look at assisted living. So obviously, if you're spending $1,000, that's a fraction. You can do that for 8 months, and a lot of the things, $1,000 is spending a lot, I mean,
Hmm.
that's getting a lot of services. But, even if you're willing to, just invest, even $500 a month, or $200 a month, you can really extend your time at home.
I kind of finally met with some success on the handyman. Because,
Uh-huh.
I mean, I think one day I came in and maybe my dad was like on this rickety wooden ladder trying to change the light bulb in the overhead light in the garage door opener. And I was like, oh my God, wait, what? Like, no, don't, this is not what you need to be doing. I know you can, but it makes me nervous to think that you might be. Like, please, let's just find a handyman. And I mean, it did take probably 6 months to find the right person. And
Mhm.
I'm not saying that this person is the holy grail, but when like grab bars could be installed, some painting projects could be fixed. Like, so even though there are things that you could do and you maybe did do in the past, isn't it better to just like pay somebody $1,000 to do it, get it done,
Right.
have it be safe, and you're keeping yourself potentially out of a different living situation?
Right. Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. And I do, a lot of times when people say, I've been doing this myself for, 60 years, I will say a lot of times, I understand you can do it, but why? I mean, is it
Hmm.
worth the risk? Is it worth it to, get on the ladder and change a smoke detector, you know, rather than, getting somebody to come in and do that, where you fall off that ladder? We're talking 6 months of, from the time you get back you know, to where you are today. It's about 6 months after breaking something. You
So do
know,
you think that people eventually accept your logic? Like, how many conversations might it take before they're like, you know what, that Julie lady was really onto something? Like, when do they embrace this logic and take action towards it?
So there's like an old marketing saying that like people have to hear things 7 times before it sinks in. And so there are times that I actually will say to family members, I'll say, just so you know, I could be the seventh voice, and so because sometimes before I go out for my appointments, I schedule with the kids a lot
Mm-hmm.
of times, and the kids will tell me, I've been bringing this up with mom and we're getting nowhere. And I say, just so you know, if they agree to it while I'm there, don't do one of these like, oh my gosh. Let's be happy that they agreed. It might also be that they agree and they change their mind, and but I do think sometimes I laugh and I say sometimes I'm going to be voice 7 and sometimes I'm voice 1,
Mm-hmm.
and I personally am okay, and I will say that to like my clinicians when they add me in, they'll say I don't think they're ready, but I think that they need to start hearing this. And so sometimes I'll say to people, listen, I don't expect you to remember all of the resources, but what I want you to remember is there are things out there. And so you don't have to remember what those things are, but remember that there are, and let's get help when you need it.
I love that. And it's also just knowing that you're the resource, right? You could be that gateway to provide, they can say, hey, this is an issue I'm facing. What do you know about what's available?
And I do have, I kind of like always say, like repeat, I have repeat customers that you know, they break an ankle, they're on service with us,
Right.
they get better, they get back to driving, they don't need, they actually do recover.
Mm-hmm.
And then 2 years later, something else. I literally just had somebody where I looked at their record and I had literally seen them 1 year the same, it was like April 17th, 2024 and April 17th, 2025.
Oh.
So it's just, and that they had done fine during, you
Mm-hmm.
know, they limped along and the family could remember some of the things I said, but they remembered that I was there and that I had said there were some solutions. And
Right.
so when I came back in, they were a little bit more open to that idea.
I mean, something that you said resonated with me, which is this idea of I can tell my mom 5 times that she should do something, like medication related or whatever it is. I can't remember now. There was a specific thing where I said, maybe you should take magnesium at night because it helps people sleep and a lot of people use it. And yeah, I probably told her 10 times and she just ignored me. And then we're at a doctor's appointment one day and her doctor is like, well, are you taking magnesium at night? And she's like, oh, that's a great idea. I'm like, oh my gosh.
Right,
Talk about being
right,
the seventh voice, but and like sometimes it's just which voice has the most authority, right? And of course, I mean, I'm going to listen to a doctor probably over my mother in some cases. So I mean, I get it, but as the kids, sometimes you do feel like you're kind of banging your head against the wall, like, oh my
right.
God, really? You could have been doing this
Exactly.
6 months ago.
Yeah. Yeah.
I guess you get there when you get there, right?
Right. And, and that is really when I go back to you have every right to make your own decisions, good or bad. Depends on what the decision is. Sometimes I say you have your right to make your own bad decisions. Sometimes I say you have your right to make your own decisions. But, sometimes I do really say you have the right, when somebody's like, I've fallen 4 times. I fall every time I don't use my walker, but I don't want people to see me as weak. Therefore, I won't use my walker. And I'll say you have every right to make, your own bad decisions. But when you are in rehab for the third
Right.
time and the rehab says you are not allowed to return home, then you are going to be in a different situation. And I'd really like to avoid that. And so
Right.
let's talk about what we can do, to do some of that planning.
One of the things that you talked about was having them respond to the question, um, how are your decisions going to impact your children? Right? How is this
Mhm.
decision going to impact your children? Is this a way that you want your children to be expected to care for you? And I had never thought about that. Talk a little bit more about how that works.
Okay. So there's two times that I really talk about that a lot with families. One is when when people are saying that they are refusing to get help in. They want their children to be there, but their children don't even, sometimes they even live in state. But they live in a different home. And the kids say to me, I don't sleep at night. And anything that wakes me up in the middle of the night, I think it's the phone ringing, that it's
Mm,
the fire department that is going to call me about, my mom or dad. And so there are times that the kids will tell me that, but they don't really say it that bluntly to families, to their parents. And so I will sometimes, turn to the kids and I'll say, "Are you sleeping?" And they'll say, "No." And I'll say, "Can you tell us why?" And I've had literally more than once where the mom's face just drops and she's like, "I had no idea."
mm.
And she said, what is it that you need me to do then? And they'll say, "I need you to wear, the medical alert system. Because I know that if you're wearing a medical alert system and you fall out of bed, that somebody's got, I'm going to get called, someone's going to get called." But without that, I'm just in the middle of the night thinking, I bet she fell out of bed.
Yeah.
Maybe I should go over there, you know, and all of that. So that is a big one, is that, is around how people are feeling at nighttime with their family member. And then the other big one is driving. And so I get a lot of times people say, "I've been driving since I was 15 years old. I refuse." That what they equate I mean, they still remember being 15 and getting their keys and
Yeah, for
what
sure.
that meant to them, that freedom, that, I am an adult. And so to take away their keys is devastating. So there are some cases of children being held liable for a parent who has been told not to drive, where the kids say, "Oh, we try to limit their driving, but they have not physically removed the keys from the house." And, the worst case was, a local senior who killed a kid and she was sentenced to prison. She died before she was able to go, but then they did a civil suit against the kids. And it's just, so when people realize that their kids could be held liable, you've put down that your kid is your medical and your physical and your financial power of attorney, and yet you're not allowing them to make these decisions.
Mm,
And you're not only endangering your life, everybody on the road, you're also endangering them. And so those are the one time that I kind of get um a little harsh with people and say to the kids, "Do you realize that you are liable?" Anyone can sue anyone. So whether it's your fault or not, I mean,
right, right.
I mean, like, I'm not going to say, like, but, and there are things you can do to make sure, like, if the doctor doesn't say that they can't drive, I mean, there's so many different pieces on whether you'd actually really be liable. But it's that, if you're, again, to the kids, if you're not sleeping at night,
Right.
because you're worried about those things.
And also just with the driving, I mean, I think for all of us, this is like a cross we know we have to bear, right? And I think, I mean, in the conversations I've had with my parents, my dad especially, he harkens back to the decision with his dad, right? And how difficult
Yes,
that was. And so I think from his perspective, he's thinking, okay, I'm not going to repeat that. I'm not going to make you go through what I went through and the bitterness. So, I mean, he definitely he's aware of it. It's a conversation, but like you said, it's still hard. And it is
it
a
is.
conversation that you have to revisit because what we talked about when you were 85 might be very different from 90, 95, God forbid, even later. Maybe some people are great
Yeah.
drivers at 95. I have no idea. But like at some point, you're thinking, should we even really be having this conversation anymore?
Right. Right. There are people that are occupational therapists, that are driving specialists that will go out and drive with people. That is one of the biggest ones that I'll say to people. I can give you, I have a couple, I have three different resources in in Denver that does driving evaluations with people. And as soon as I say that to people, I've had numerous times where the and it's usually the father who looks at the kids and says, "Do you want me to do a driving evaluation with this person?" And the kids say, "Yes. I don't want to be the one to tell you not to drive, but I am worried about your driving, and it would make me feel so much better if a third party person came in." And I can't tell you how many times people have said, "Well, then here's my keys."
Oh,
And that they
they
don't
just
even,
don't even want to do the assessment. They're just like,
they,
that's too
yep,
far. Oh,
yep. But it is, if they, and times where, and I'll talk to people afterwards and I'm like, did they really give up their keys and keep them given up? And they'll say, yes. They said it was that part that they realized that somebody else could possibly tell them what to do. They wanted it on their own terms.
I respect
And I
that.
was like,
Yeah,
I totally
great.
respect that.
Right. I mean,
Yeah.
I think for any of us, it's like, well, I know I should be doing, I don't know, whatever it is, X, Y, or Z in my life. And then if you were going to tell me, okay, we're going to have a third party come in and watch how you brush your teeth or whatever, maybe I would be like, okay, you know what? I'll spend a little more time flossing, right? I
Right.
know I can do
Exactly.
better.
Yeah.
But it's like putting it off on a third party, even or just the possibility of a third party. It's so smart because it helps preserve that parent-child relationship. And that's what we want,
Yeah.
right? We want to be able to have like that parent-child or just that loving connection with our parents. And when all of a sudden you become like the full-time caretaker, which I mean that might happen also, but it's nice to prolong it or have other people to get in the mix.
And I always do tell people I can bring in someone to do your laundry and to drive you around and clean your house and help you get in and out of bed and shower. I can do all of that. I can't bring you a different child. I can't recreate I can get somebody in here who will talk to you, but it's not going to be your daughter or your son. And so it sounds like your child has taken this duty on. So let's take that off of them so that then when they're here, they get to be your child and you guys get to sit around and talk and play a game and, do those type of things and let somebody else clean the toilets.
Love it. Love it, love it, love it. Okay, so this brings me to another one of like my Julieisms, which I had never heard of this before, and I feel like remiss that I didn't know about the spoon theory, which we
Oh,
talked about.
yeah.
And I love it. So will you talk about the spoon theory?
Sure. Spoon theory it's gotten a lot of attention in the chronic illness community. And so the idea is, and I don't know where the spoons come from, but you can think of it with whatever you want. Spoons are what I learned it with, and so that's what I've always used. But the idea is that when you are sick or when you are not at your full capacity, it takes a spoon to do different activities. So, for instance, I might have unlimited spoons right now, and so I don't have to think about getting up and brushing my teeth and taking a shower. But there are times that I'm tired. I have different things that are going on, and I am laying in bed, and I think I can either get up and take a shower or brush my teeth. And so the idea is that everything you do takes spoons. And some days you might have unlimited spoons, and some days you might have 10 spoons. So thinking about using a spoon to do an activity is what stuff is more important. And that's when I go back to somebody else can do my laundry
Mm.
and can again clean my toilets. I would rather use my spoon to go play tennis or hang out with a friend. And if I don't have unlimited spoons, and so it might, I mean, like I literally am not saying that it could be, you might not always have unlimited spoons,
Right.
and you might have spoons that you could do the things you love, but And so I am going to not cook dinner. I'm going to, heat up a pizza. And so those are, I don't have time to do an elaborate, or I love to make a meal. And so I would rather spend, an hour and cook dinner and have somebody come in and do my laundry or whatever those things are. And so the biggest example I always think about is both my kids have a chronic illness. And when they were little, I used to carry them from the car. I mean, this is when they were like 3 and 5. I would literally carry them from the car to the playground because I never wanted them to waste a spoon walking from the car to the playground. And so that was one of the first times that I started thinking about helping my kids sort of talk about what we do to preserve our energy.
Yeah.
And so it is that spoon theory. And the other thing is, what was really, really helpful was as my kids got older, they then could use that terminology back to me. And sometimes I would forget because I have unlimited spoons. Some
Right.
days, but
Right.
but and so yeah. And so sometimes this is a really good, I've had people tell me that they like this because when their kids are saying, why aren't you doing your exercises, or why aren't you doing whatever it was that the kids thought that the parents should be doing, it's something for the parents to say, well, I used my spoons today. I had to use 10 spoons to, get up and take a shower. So
Right.
I can't do these other things. And so then it also it's a very freeing way to talk about, well, what spoons can I do for you? What do we want to hire someone to do? And
Yeah.
then it just gets people to start empowering them to say, I want to use my spoon because my spoon's to have my granddaughter over and, sit on the floor and play with her. But if I do that, that means I can't do X, Y, and Z.
Yeah, I love that. And I love it too as a reminder of like when we're interacting with our parents, because as they get older, maybe they have less energy. And even my mom said this to me the other day, like, I don't have the same stamina for cleaning out a closet that I might have had 10 years ago. Like I just get tapped out, right? And so it's a good reminder for me as the kid, the helper, the caretaker, like, you know what? Your mom has different energy than you. I'm not going to say more or less, but different, right? And so her spoons for this organizing project, she may have 3 spoons she wants to dedicate to that. I have 20, but I need to respect where she's coming from. And so I love that. And I also love that it's like an objective item, so it's not talking about me, Kirsten, or my mom. It's like, they're just spoons.
Right, right.
Like it takes the emotion out of it, right? It's not like I'm too tired. It's just, I don't have these spoons for this today. So
Yeah. I've
can I
used up
use
all
that
my
now?
spoons.
I feel like I need that at home. Honey, I don't have spoons to cook dinner or do the laundry
Right.
or whatever. I mean, we share a lot of spoons, but you know what I'm saying, right?
Totally.
Yeah.
Yes.
Like, I don't
Yeah.
want to cook dinner. Do the kids have to eat dinner every night? I mean, so
Exactly.
is there anything else that I didn't ask about that's in your mind that you would want to share with people as a way to navigate this time?
I think one of the biggest things that I always tell people is you make the best decisions with the information you have at the moment. And just because you make a decision and it doesn't go well, I mean, and sometimes that happens. Sometimes you make a decision and and hindsight 2020 was that wasn't the best decision. That's not that you made a bad decision. It was that you made the best decision with the information that you have then. And some things are just out of our control. And I think what happens is people are so afraid of making the wrong decision that they make no decision. And that is a decision. And sometimes doing nothing is worse than doing the quote unquote wrong thing. And so most decisions can be changed, so sometimes they're changed and they're an expensive change. you know we moved my mother-in-law into a community that was and that she lived in that community for 24 hours. And we realized it was the wrong community, and we pulled her back, and we were luckily able to move her back into the community where she was before, and we had to make all these other changes. It cost us a pretty penny for that 24 hours that we were there, but it wasn't that we made the bad decision. It was the wrong choice, but we did not know it until, and all of our reasons why we made the decision that she could keep the dog, I mean, there's just all of
Mm-hmm.
these different things of why we thought that this was the right move. Is those that all of that stuff was true, it still was a bad decision.
Right.
And bad is the wrong word. It was the wrong decision, and we were able to fix it. And
Right.
so that's the other thing is that when you realize that something is not great, fix it when you figure it out. You know, don't get so married to it and think, I've got to make this work. Sometimes you don't. And, and now the other thing is if you ever do move into a community, things don't always go smoothly. And sometimes you can make changes within the community, tell them what it is. And sometimes it just wasn't the right fit. And
Mm-hmm.
you really do have to
Yeah.
move. But
I mean, I'm thinking of our kids in college, right? And like sometimes you pick the right school, sometimes you don't. I mean, and that happens. That happens at sometimes you make the right job choice, and sometimes maybe you would have made a better choice, but you're doing the best
right,
you can with the information you have at that moment. And I think, I mean, I love that as a mantra to just guide you through it because we don't have a crystal ball. Like you said, we don't know
right.
how it's going to go. So we just can
It
do the best with what we have. And that's sound advice for most things.
for most things. But I think we do get committed where I think we're afraid of being wrong, and that sometimes it's hard to admit that maybe that wasn't the right fit,
Mhm.
and let's make a change.
I loved having you, and I love all my Judaisms and my spoons and my, you know, one incident away from a crisis. I have all these. I'm going to start putting some yellow sticky notes up. But I
Oh, good.
love
Yeah.
that you were here today and were able to share with us all your expertise. So thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule to share your wisdom with us.
Well, and thank you for doing this. I think it's very important that people do feel like there's only one way to go down a path. And I love that you are sort of just opening up people's minds to just think about things differently. And thank you for doing this, and enjoy it.
Yeah, it's been super fun. I've certainly opened up my own mind in a lot of different ways. So, if nothing else, that's a great benefit of all of this. So, thank you again, and hopefully you can join us on another episode of Who Gets the China?
That sounds great. Thank you.
Who Gets the China is written and hosted by Kirsten Mau, produced by Aaron Bryce of Blue Ogden Productions. Our theme music is composed by Greg Fellman of Wind Sand Productions. Our cover art is by Jen Beam of Gigawatt Studio. For more stories and expert advice, follow along on Substack or at www.whogetsthechina.com. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with someone who might appreciate the conversation. And don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Until next time.